If we have any visitors among us, we welcome you. My name is Charles Plemons. This is a study in Proverbs. And if you are going to be with us through September, we have workbooks if you would like that. And we also, if you're just visiting or if you have temporarily misplaced your workbook, we have handouts for tonight. Does anybody need either of those things? Yes, ma'am. Worksheet? Workbook? Workbook. Yes, ma'am. There you go. All right. So last week we started talking about this section 4, called Abomination to the Lord. And we started talking about things that the Lord finds an abomination, or things that he hates, things that he despises. And so if you are at home and you want to follow along with us and interact, there's a QR code here on the board, so you can scan that and interact with us as we do our review. So we talked about from Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 through 19. It lists 6, yea, 7 things that the Lord finds as an abomination. So just as a little bit of review, let's talk about those things. Look here, my technology is going to fail me right off the bat. When all else fails, reboot. There we go. All right, so these 7 things that were listed in Proverbs 6, who can tell us what some of those were? What were things that it says the Lord hates? A proud look. Yeah, pride, a proud look. A crooked tongue or a lying tongue. What else? Shedding innocent blood. Okay, that's 3. Wicked plans, okay? Devising wicked plans. There's 4. What else? Sowing discord. Okay, there's 5. False witness, bearing false witness, which is related to the lying, right? All right, and what was the last one? What have we left out? We said discord, yeah. Feet swift to mischief, the person who is running to mischief, or some translations say evil. So 7 things here it lists. It says God hates these things, or God finds these as an abomination. Now, I think it's important that we point out, when I look at this list, I recognize some things of which I have been guilty. Seeing this list and knowing that these are things that God hates, we shouldn't look at this and think there is no hope, there's doom, there is gloom. God is telling us these are things I don't like. There are all kinds of things that are sin that God tells us he doesn't like. But he also tells us there's a path back from sin. And we need to understand that. So as we go through these things, we need to remember we're looking at an opportunity here where God is telling us these are things I don't like, and here are some of the reasons why I don't like these things. But just because you might look at some of these things and feel, I have done this, or I'm doing this now, that is not to say that there is not a path of salvation. Okay, God is willing that all repent and be redeemed. So, just want to put that out there. So, moving on here, maybe. Well, it's going to be one of those nights. All right. So, we were ready to talk about then shedding of innocent blood. Shedding of innocent blood. So, this is a reference here to murder. And if we go out, there it goes, now it's working. We can go to just about any news outlet of our choice, and it's not very hard to find acts of innocent blood being shed. So, what are some examples where innocent blood is shed? How might that happen? Abortion, certainly. Abortion. Domestic violence, yeah, so things get out of hand in a domestic situation. That's the thing about violence. Once it starts, it tends to escalate. So you see that in the news very often. What else? Drunk driver, Cain killed Abel. Okay, so yeah, that's a great example of that anger. You have the drunk driver, so they've made this choice to drive intoxicated and harm either themselves or someone else. Great examples. Gun violence, okay, and that covers a huge swath of different reasons that might come out from that. What else? Child abuse, okay, absolutely, child abuse, certainly. Let's see some of the examples I had here. Let's see what we've left out. So a mugger assaulting someone who dies, a family squabble that gets out of hand, a guard that's killed in a robbery, like a bank robbery or something like that, a police officer shot on duty, a parent mistreating or neglecting a child, a jealous or spurned lover killing someone that supposedly they claim to love. So it... Yeah. So a lot of times we think of a lot of this, just the list of crimes going on throughout society. A lot of times they lead to all these various things. So drug abuse, drug culture, things that people are lacing drugs with. All kinds of different ways. Yeah, leads to death. People killing each other over trying to acquire drugs. All kinds of ways. So it's very easy for us to find examples of this in our society. So let's look at an example from Scripture. Let's look in 1 Kings chapter 21. We want to consider an example. We have Jezebel and Ahab taking possession of Naboth's vineyard. And so what's going on here in this that we're about to read is that she has now framed him and he is killed. And that's an example of shedding innocent blood. So 1 Kings chapter 21. We're looking at verses 15 and 16. It says, "And it came to pass, when Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned and was dead, that Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give you for money. For Naboth is not alive, but dead. So it was when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, that Ahab got up and went down to take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." So an example here of shedding of innocent blood. And you really see multiple sins going on here, don't you? You've got a lot of different things combined. You had that idea of lying, you had the false witness, you had pride, you had greed, you had the shedding of innocent blood. Just a whole lot, all bundled right here in this one example. Now, somebody mentioned earlier, we see widespread in our society today. We see abortion, so that's shedding of innocent blood. We see concepts like euthanasia. So when people meet certain qualifying conditions, they are put to death. Now, a lot of times that is brought up in the idea of kind of the mercy death or the mercy killing. Someone is very ill, and so they are seeking the release of death, so to speak. But euthanasia does not always have that connotation either. There are times in society, throughout the world, throughout history, where certain people, for different reasons, were put to death. So it could be age, it could be, deformities, it could be, the race that they are. It's all kinds of different things that someone is chosen for some condition to be put to death. An example, this one hits close to home. Some countries now rigorously test for Down syndrome before birth and recommend abortion for those that come back with a positive result. So we had the opportunity to do the testing before Caden was born. We opted not to because the doctor asked us a very simple question. Would you do anything differently regardless of the results of the test? We thought about it. Well, no. He said, well, why put yourself through that? And also, sometimes these are false positives. So if you were going to do something, maybe you did something and you didn't need to. But we see this. We see this happening around the world. So God calls into judgment those who murder the innocent. Now, again, remember what I said at the beginning of this is we're talking about sin, and there is a pathway for forgiveness for all sin. But the punishment for any unforgiven sin is what? Death. Right. Separation from God. So God takes this sin and every sin very seriously. Turn with me to Genesis 9, verse 6. Genesis 9, verse 6. It says, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. God values life. God gives life. God has plans for people in this life. He wants them to achieve certain things, accomplish certain things. God has a plan for each and every single one of us. He has put, for example, His word in our hands. Every one of us is responsible for spreading that word to others. Every single one of us has the opportunity to bring someone back into a saved relationship with God. Well, if I'm murdered before I get the chance to do that, that could be multiple deaths. My physical death, but that could prevent someone from being reunited with God. Life is precious. God sees life as very precious. So when we talk about things that God hates, we can understand why murder would be something that He finds as, somebody defined it last week, I think, as despicable, as abhorrent, as aberrant, as an abomination. God doesn't want man killing one another. Any thoughts or comments so far? Yeah, and so we also have the kind of the reverse of that. We have plenty of people that justify devaluing human life because they don't believe in God. You know, if we don't have God stamping His value on human life, it's very easy for us to dismiss that and say, well, it's just another accident, like you said, an animal and a human being the same. That's not what God teaches us. That's good. What else?
Some major world power, largest one in the world, that until very recently had a preference for male children, and female children were exposed to the elements of death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's prime example of euthanasia right there. This group is selected to live. This group is not. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, so the idea that the value of a woman is of less value than a man. It's not what we're seeing here. All right. Let's move on then to Wicked planning. Wicked planning. So from Proverbs 15:26, and it's listed on your slide and on the board here, it says, "The thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord, but the words of the pure are pleasant." So remember in Proverbs 6, just a few minutes ago, when it was listing out the 7 things that God abhors or finds it an abomination, we saw wicked planning there. We have another example here in Proverbs 15, reiterating this idea that the thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to the Lord. So what are wicked thoughts? What is wicked planning? What's that mean? Yeah, deciding to do something either, thinking it through. This idea of I have some kind of motivation to do something that is morally wrong, sinful. So scheming, conniving, making the plans to do what is wrong. So wickedness is often committed after scheming to commit wickedness. It's the result of the scheme or result of conspiring. Let's look in Proverbs chapter 1. Proverbs 1, 11 through 13. Proverbs 1, 11, 13, it says, "If they say, 'Come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil." So in this example, what is the scheme? Robbery. Yeah. A mugging, right? Or an ambush. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's talking about very similar to that, this idea that you've got someone, look how casual this conversation seems, right? "Come with us, let us lie in wait to shed blood, let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause." So it seems very, very casual, right? Very callous. Someone who does not have a good moral compass, a good conscience, certainly not guided by God's valuing of life. So we see this, they're planning to mug someone, to rob someone, kill someone, and for what? Well, the purpose being spelled out here in verse 13. In this example, it says, "We shall find all kinds of precious possessions." We want to take their stuff, right? We want to get their things. Well, that could be wealth. That could be various other things that somebody might have that somebody else might covet for whatever reason. It doesn't have to be just money or a car or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, it's easier to take something from somebody if they're dead. They can't come back for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very nonchalantly, very callously. Absolutely. So that's a great example here then of wickedness, right? They are planning wickedness, and what is the result? Wickedness, the shedding of innocent blood. So we have the planning to do the deed leading to the deed itself. So both things being on this list of things that God finds as an abomination. So it's easy to think about this in the term of a criminal who's trying to mastermind a crime, but how are other ways that people plan wickedness?
Ponzi schemes, or falsifying business records, or embezzlement.
Yeah, okay, so in the business world, there's all kinds of different ways to lie, cheat, and steal other people's money into your possession. Certainly. Now, that kind of example often doesn't lead to death. You know, there are certainly examples where murder is involved, but that's a great wicked planning, right? The wicked planning begins, and then the sin continues from there. Yes, sir. Yeah, absolutely. Great. So it's walking around in darkness, this wickedness. In the back, yes.
I think a lot of it has to do with people who don't have normal human affection. They don't see other humans as humans, worthy of respect. You know, they're the people that go to a farm, some single farm, persuade somebody that they have some type of romantic affection for them, but really they don't at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can see a lot of sometimes going about looking for somebody they can take advantage of and make a relationship with just to get something out of it, just to have it.
Okay. Yes. So
They're as hard-hearted as the word murder around there.
yeah. So another example of this wicked scheming. You know, you have a plan to achieve something. You know, you go about trying to get things, you know, not through a moral kind of way. All right, what else? Yes, sir.
The definition of in today's world, the definition of a crime is the actus reus, or the act itself. Mens reus, which is the guilty mind, and the intended circumstances. You must be able to show there was intent
Mm-hmm.
in order to convict. You don't have to show a motive in a criminal trial. You got to show the intent of the guilty mind.
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to Proverbs 1 here. You know, it says here, you know, we're going to do this without cause. Now, we do see a motive later on, but this idea of we're just going to do this.
The law itself said, the Old Testament law said, if a man lie in wait to kill his neighbor, then he was guilty of murder.
Mm-hmm.
But if the head of his act came off and flew it while he was chopped wood, and he flew and hit his neighbor in the head and killed him, that was not murder.
Mm-hmm.
There was no guilty.
Right, there's no wicked planning.
It was an accident.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw a hand right here.
I think we need to remember that if you, it's wicked planning also, if you only tell people the facts that are going to convince them, not the facts that are, not all the facts.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're exactly right. You know, so the idea of I'm going to give somebody part of the truth, part of the facts in order to convince them of something. Yes, sir.
It was announced on national news that over $3 billion is scammed out of most of senior citizens. And it's up from last year.
Mm-hmm.
It continues people devising ways to take advantage of someone, steal from them.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they're lying in wait. Sort of like
Sure, they absolutely are. Yeah, and it's so much easier now because we have so much technology that connects us with people all around the world. People can be completely on the opposite end of the planet and still take advantage of you because we have these means of communication that we never had before. Yes, ma'am, in the very back.
One thing I've noticed about is that people plan to do wickedness and start in the mind and in the heart. And you can murder and commit crimes against the
Yeah, and once you're doing that in your heart, it makes it so much easier to do it in real life. I see a hand over here too. Yes, ma'am.
Also thinking you understand how are other ways people, may plan wickedness. Unfortunately, we see it in the church and the communities where people plan against each other to keep people from them or to plant seeds against people and and I don't understand that. And I don't know, a friend and I have a saying, there's no hurt like church hurt.
Mm-hmm.
When those people that you love, that are your brothers and sisters, hurt you. There's no pain like that, and that's also a type of this, because some premeditation comes in there for things to be said and not to work through them
Mm-hmm.
like should be done.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's a great example. And you saying that, I was thinking, there's no hurt like church hurt. I also, that made me think of God's perspective. How hurt is God when we sin versus somebody who's outside of the church? I think it's all the worse. Great examples. Yes, sir.
I think a lot of times people think someone else is so bad that you can treat them any way you want to, and it won't be.
Yeah. Yeah, we tend to dehumanize people that we have negative thoughts about, whether the facts are in our favor or not. It's so much easier to treat people poorly, and we see that spiral out of control all the time.
We should look at the exact opposite of all this and realize the great blessing we have in the freedom of being Christians is that we aren't our brother's judge. We don't have to worry about of course there's blank examples, but just in general, the Word will judge him. We don't have to judge him.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to analyze him. That's not our job.
Yeah, and we don't have all the answers. We can't.
We love him
Mm-hmm.
and have his best interest at heart.
Yeah. Yeah, we are very fortunate that God is the judge, not each other. Yeah. So the great thing about God being our judge is there's not going to be any false witnesses. There's not going to be any jury tampering. We don't have to fear a lack of justice. Now, we do have to fear, are we right with God? And that's entirely our responsibility. But we don't have to worry about this worldly interference. We see trials go wrong. We see juries tampered with. We see justice perverted. We don't have to worry about that from God. That is such an amazing blessing. All right, we got some great lists here. Let's see some of them we had on the board here. So, planning to cheat on a spouse. That's wicked planning. Somebody mentions, similar to this, misleading people through false doctrine. So, leading people down the wrong path by changing the truth. Making a living off of sin. That was mentioned in several different ways. Tricking someone for your advantage. So all these different ways that people make these different plans. And God, He tells us this is an abomination. He doesn't want us to plan wickedness. Planning wickedness is the first step down a very, very dark hole. Wicked planning is very bad. But then what it leads to can be even so much worse. So God's telling us, don't even touch it. Don't even look at it. Stay away from it. If you don't do the planning, you're less likely to do the deed. Don't open that door. All right. Any others that have come to mind, anybody? Or anything else you want to add? This is great.
In our own justice system, premeditated crime has a harsher penalty than the crime without it being premeditated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. You've thought it through. You've decided, I absolutely want to do this. There's no accident or, emotion. It's just, I've gone through with this. I've thought about it for days, weeks, hours, whatever it may be. Certainly. Certainly. Anything else? Yes, sir.
I'm having just a little problem with this whole discussion.
Okay.
We're looking at all these terrible things.
Yeah.
Why am I getting all wrapped up in planning what I can do nasty things?
Yeah. All right. So, in case people couldn't hear that's an excellent point. So step one is not the planning, but we've got a problem with our sin or conscience or morality to begin with that causes us to even look at planning it. Hold on, we got two talking at the same time here. Let's start here.
I said the first part of verse 18 tells exactly what it is, the heart that devises wicked plans. So it starts within our heart, within our mind.
Yeah, excellent. Levi?
Said there are all people in society that will believe it, can't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, great discussion. So we've rolled back step one.
We have to guard our hearts.
Sure.
We have an adversary who's going to try to hit thoughts in our head.
Sure. Well, it's kind of like the discussion of the cars earlier. If material possessions are what you value, then you've already set up the opportunity for the devising of the schemes and the sin. If we have that properly associated in our life and valued properly, where we're putting obedience to God first, we're getting rid of that opportunity for the planning and for the sin. Great discussion. What else?
In 1980, I believe it was, or 82, there was two men that came down to Bowling Green from Indianapolis. And they went into Morris Jewelry and cased the place. That's the planning. And then they came back and produced a gun in Mrs. Kyle's face and took a lot of jewelry. We got there and they had nowhere to go. So they took a prisoner and walked across the wall and commandeered the car, whose driver had a little baby in the baby seat in the back seat. And when that man walked around to get put his prisoner in the front seat, he had a hold of her and had a hold of his gun and was looking the wrong way, so we shot him. He planned it out. There are people that will do that. There are mean people in this world.
Yeah, and so that example you just gave, you see, they planned this robbery, and then they're carrying it out, and you see it also continue to spiral too. So their heart was not right. They made the plans. They started committing the sin. That led one thing to another, ended up with this individual shot, apparently. So,
Romans 13 says that the officer of the law bears not the sword in vain. So I have no regrets of that, although it still bothers me sometimes.
well, and who knows who else would have been hurt?
Absolutely no other way to do it.
Yeah. Great example. What else?
Charles, let's remember that Satan can use any tool he can use to destroy God's truth, whatever question mark is out there. And he knows he can his heels. So every single individual, how weak we are, and he takes advantage of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
God's grace.
Right. Yeah. All right. Last week I said you all drank your coffee first, and I said do it again. You did it. This is fantastic. This really is. And it's all right. We've only got through one slide. That's okay. All right. Anything else before we start talking about swift feet? All right. So we're warned about feet that are swift to mischief, or feet that are swift to evil, some translations say. So this is a condemnation against those who are hastily following through in the wickedness that they've devised in their hearts. So they are moving toward evil. They don't have the speed limiter, if you will, that slows them down and think, oh, I need to not do this. It's just, hey, I've got a bad idea, and now it's time to do it. So this includes things like choosing to walk in the ways of sin instead of righteousness, people who harden their heart to the Lord, people who are rejecting the word, people who are, we'll use the term brazen sinners. And Proverbs talks about this quite a bit. So Proverbs 3:32, let's start there. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 32. It says, "For the perverse person is an abomination to the Lord, but his secret counsel is with the upright." So this perverse person, this person who is following through in the wickedness in their heart, says they're an abomination to the Lord. Turn over a few pages, Proverbs 11 and verse 20. It says, "Those who are of a perverse heart are an abomination to the Lord." Sounds very similar to the one we just read, right? "Those who are a perverse heart are an abomination to the Lord, but the blameless in their ways are his delight." So who delights him? Those whose ways are blameless. So the perverse, the opposite, must be those who are what? Their ways are blamed. Their perverse ways, their deeds. They're rushing to evil. They're doing these evil deeds. They're carrying them out. And a few pages over again, Proverbs 15. Proverbs 15, 8 and 9. It says, "The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. The way of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but he loves him who follows righteousness." So we're talking about deeds, actions. So when we're talking about the people who have these feet swift to mischief, these are the ones that are going along with the sin, with the activity, the wickedness, the opposite of righteousness. So in some ways, you can say this is calling out the person who is not pausing to think about the ramifications of their actions. It can be anybody who is making that conscious decision to do the wrong things. They're seeking out evil or wickedness. And we see that. We know people like that. We see that happen in society all the time. Sometimes it's people who know better. Sometimes it's people who maybe should know better. But we have examples of this all around us. Anybody have any examples or thoughts or comments on those? Yeah. Right. And let's, again, not forget that sometimes we are these evil people. Sometimes our heart is seared. Sometimes we go along with some of these thoughts and ideas and things and need to be restored to God. And we just ran out of time. Quick comment.
I think this also calls out those who, the ramifications
As long as it doesn't hurt me, it's okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Great class tonight. We'll pick up here with slide 10 next week.